Hey guys, I am Ashley Elder. At convention, I took the Grape to Glass class, so I am going to sort of brief you guys on what we learned during that session, okay? I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so at Scout and Cellar, of course, all of our wine is organic, but we go beyond organic. And so in this session, what we focused on that was beyond organic was our farming methods. Our farmers don't just farm organically grown grapes. They do that, but that's not all we do. They go a step further, just like Scout and Cellar does. At the session, we had a couple of people. One was somebody that you guys might already know of. His name is Mo, and he is the owner of the Maysara Winery in Oregon. He was so fun to listen to. He is so passionate, so passionate. I mean, we all love his wine, but I truly fell in love with him and have so much respect for him after listening him talk to how the farming of his grapes really is where his passion lies. It was really neat. The other person that we had was AJ. AJ has the worst job in the world. Just kidding. He is our director of wine ops for Scout and Cellar. So he's the guy that gets to go to all the different little wineries all over the world and sort of help Sarah scout out the ones that fit our clean crafted commitment. Okay, so to the farming methods. So between Mo and AJ, we had an expert panel who kind of took us through the bones of the couple of different kinds of farming that we use. It's really all biodynamic, right? But within the umbrella of biodynamic, we have the organic and we have the what they call regenerative ag paradigm. So in a nutshell, you can see on this slide, it's basically we are partnering with nature and we're not competing with nature. In Mo's words, he said, literally any kind of farming is better than conventional farming, which got a giggle out of the room. Okay, so regenerative farming. Regenerative agriculture is mainly focusing on the soil health, okay? So it's cover crops, it's holistic fertilizers. Cover crops, so cover crops are what they plant at the base of the vines or any type of agriculture that sort of help the sustainability of the soil. So it actually helps the structure of the soil so that there is no erosion. It helps suppress bad weeds. And it really just, by doing those things, it promotes soil health and fertility. An example that Mo gave, and I'm not sure if he uses this at his farm or not, but is the stinging nettle. So not only is the stinging nettle a cover crop that helps with soil erosion, but it's the stinging nettle. So it also keeps little critters away that aren't supposed to be digging around at the base of the vines. Holistic fertilizer. So that's compost, and within, of course, it's animal waste. And I'm going to get to the sustainability for generations in just a second. But the main thing to take from this is regenerative farming is really soil health, okay? Now, biodynamic farming, which is a term that we use all the time, is using the world, the ecosystem around the farm in order to be an organic farmer without having to use any synthetic pesticides or anything. So it's using the animals, it's using all the plants, all of the regenerative farming methods that we already talked about. And it also, Mo actually spoke a little bit about sort of that planetary piece of it that sometimes throws people. You know, you can kind of get on board with, you know, a duck that, you know, you run the ducks through the vine so that they eat the snails off, or you can kind of get on board of, well, you have that holistic fertilizer, right, that comes from animal waste. There's going to be maggots in that, sorry to gross you out, but They have chickens, so the chickens eat the maggots so that they don't grow up to be flies, because apparently flies are bad for vines as well. So you can kind of get on board with that. But then when people start talking about how does the sky and the moon and the stars, you know, that some people think it's hokey. But he made a really good point. He said, it is documented. So he said, look up Halley's Comet. I believe it was Halley's Comet. It comes around every 72 years. That's when it's the closest to the Earth. So if you go back and look at the documentation, when Halley's Comet is near the Earth, there are more volcano eruptions, earthquakes, wildfires every 72 years, because probably of the closeness of that comet. So he said, just wine, they have different vintages, and some wine tastes better than others, and that's why some vintages are better than others. It's not just the farming methods, it has something to do with the moon and the stars as well. And sometimes crops are completely blown away or burned down because of these wildfires. That's all part of it. It's just nature's way of helping out. So he talked about that. It kind of brought that back to home with me a little bit, because some people do think it's kind of out there to start talking about how the stars a million billion miles away can affect our wine, but it does. That's biodynamic farming. So a couple of interesting details from the panel that I wanted to pass on to you guys. So Mo told us that the USDA, they keep annual records of the nutrient contents in foods. He said that if you look back 100 years on the nutrient contents that was documented by the USDA, that it is, and I believe it was 15 or 13 to 20%. Now it's 13 to 20% less nutrient content in our foods than 100 years ago. Because, and he was bringing it back to regenerative farming, that soil is unhealthy. We have these farmers that are competing with nature, disturbing the soil, and it's reducing the nutrients in the soil, which is reducing the nutrients in the fruits of the soil. Which I thought was really interesting. I like to see those things that you can actually look up and are scientific. Another thing, somebody asked, and I thought this was such a great question, neighboring farms. So if you have a biodynamic organic farm and your neighbor does not, how does that affect your farm? Because the soil here and the soil here are treated differently. So he said that, they don't plant is right up to the lines of the property. And he said that there are government regulatory agencies that regulate based on a law that's called off-site targets. So if they're spraying their vines and wind comes over and blows their synthetic pesticides or whatever over onto our vines, I'll say, it will be reported, and there will be a hefty fine for that neighbor. And he said that the farmers are all, they're friends, even though they may not have the same farming methods, and even though Mo might want his friend to come over to the regenerative farming side, they are all still friends, and they try to take care of each other. He said it doesn't happen very often at all. And they build up their soil in a way that the water runoff and things like that doesn't come over into our land, into the land of the biodynamic farmer. So he said that did happen to them one time. They did have to report the neighbor, and they lost the fruit on their vines for 3 years. They had to dump the fruit from their vines for 3 years when that happened, which I think is a horrible waste, obviously. Okay, and then he mentioned how labor intensive it is, of course, to have these kinds of farms. So the fact that we can sell bottles of wine, it's really important for us to communicate this to our customers, right? The fact that we can sell these bottles of wine, which is premium wine, at the prices that we're able to is amazing, based on the labor intensity that goes into growing all of this. He said, kind of like when you're working out, you have a leg day and you have a bicep day. He said, we have a leaf day and a root day. Some days they're walking down the rows and they're checking the leaves. And then the next day on the calendar, they check it off. Well, it's not leaf day, it's root day. Let's go check on the roots. And he said, there's just so much that goes into it, but he loves it. He loves it so much, which I thought was, it's just so touching. And I just wanted to mention Scout Collective here. So Scout Collective is our clean crafted commitment to care more about just wine, but to care about the world. And I wanted to pass on something that Sarah said. It wasn't part of this panel, but she said that the second capital investment that Scout and Cellar made, capital investment is when you buy either a facility or if you buy, a piece of equipment or something. The second one that they made was what they call a baler. And everything in the winery is sustainable. So I'm not just going to read this. It's sustainable, it's recycled. The second capital investment was the baler, which takes all of those boxes and any of that waste and bales it up into tiny, so which reduces fuel costs when they have to ship it to go have it recycled. So this sort of fits in with that, right? I mean, we do care obviously about the wine and no chemicals in wine, but we also want to take care of our land, because the sustainability of our land, if we continue to drop 15 to 20% of our nutritional content in our foods, our children and our children's children are going to have to start eating on Mars. So I think that's why we have so many unhealthy folks around, because we're not getting the same things that we were getting 100 years ago out of our food. And it's because of our soil is very unhealthy. Okay, so the last thing that they kind of flashed up on the screen was this cool little documentary. I went and looked it up. It's about an hour and a half long. You can get it on Netflix. And it's called The Biggest Little Farm. And it's a documentary about a young couple who decided to leave the life of the city and start their own regenerative farm. So I have not had a chance to watch it. I just found out about it on Saturday, but I'm going to watch it this weekend and I will let you know what I think. But if you guys watch it first, then y'all should comment and let everybody know. I think that is all I had. So I'm going to stop sharing, go back to Zoom, and thank you so much. Please comment if you have any questions and somebody on the leadership team will answer you. Okay? All right.